Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about living costs in Portugal and how much it's necessary for a person or a couple, in this case, to budget per month and per year in order to live here in a comfortable fashion. Now, if you go online, you're going to find quite a lot of videos dealing with this topic. Portugal cost of living videos 2022, 2023, 2024, has it gone up, blah, blah, blah. So there's already quite a lot of content out there. The reason that I'm making this video is because I've watched those videos. I've watched a lot of them. And I think there's a lot of good in some of them, but there's also some things which I feel have been neglected. And I think that those are important factors that people need to consider, so it's worthwhile doing a video to bring it to their attention. The first problem I have with many online Portugal expense cost of living type videos is that they focus on 1 month only. Typically seems to be January of each year for some reason. Everyone likes to do that. I think this focus on a single month is wrong, and it can mislead people simply because you have expenses which occur only once a year or twice a year, and they may or may not be included or excluded from that month. And secondly, you have the seasonality associated with the weather, the temperature, and the necessity of using heating, for example. If you choose a month in the summer or you choose a month in the fall, you're probably not going to be using heating at all. And therefore, what could be a very large expense during the winter months just gets excluded. So I don't think that that's fantastic. And I think it's better to kind of average out things over the course of a year or at least a longer period of time. Another area which is problematic is that many of the people who are making these videos are just focusing on large urban centres like Lisbon, Porto, or they're looking at touristy places such as the Algarve or Madeira. And I think that that's somewhat misleading for a cost of living video, at least one that's applicable to all areas of Portugal. For example, if someone's living in a city like Aveiro or Coimbra or Braga or Castelo Branco, or they're living in Central Portugal or somewhere like that, then some of these costs are not going to apply in those cases, particularly when it comes to things like rental expenses. The last issue that I have with some of the content, most of the content that's out there, is that there is perhaps a lack of budgeting for long-term expenses. Everything seems to be very much calculated in the moment or this month. It's not thinking about, these kind of ongoing expenses that we have, or treating something like a capital purchase, for example, a car purchase, as an expense that should be considered and calculated into monthly expenses, as it should be. So I think that is an issue. I've seen a video by a lovely couple, an American couple in Madeira, discussing their transportation costs, and they deal with things like the amount that they pay for parking, the amount they pay for fuel, the amount they pay for car insurance. All of that is there. But they don't consider how much it costs them to buy the vehicle and how much it would cost to renew that vehicle after a certain period. And I think that kind of thing does need to be considered. So I think the best way to engage with this topic is simply to look at it through the lens of what I spend and what I budget to spend for longer term expenses over the course of a month, and then we can extend that to be over an annual period to kind of get a clearer picture about what the situation will be. So like with most videos, I'm going to look at this by category, and the first category is definitely accommodation, because it's going to be the major expense for most people. Now, of course, a lot of people who come to Portugal are indeed renters, and they would have rental expenses. Now, these are going to vary dramatically depending upon where you are, how big your place is, how nice it is, how modern it is, how close to the city centre it is, etc., etc. Now, in my own situation, I am not a renter. I have purchased a house. I live in a 4-bedroom house in rural central Portugal. It's a modern house. I'm very, very satisfied with it. Consequently, I don't have to pay any rent. But that does not mean that there are no expenses associated with having my own property. There very much are, and I think that this is one of the areas that some people perhaps neglect when they're making these kind of videos. First of all, if you're a property owner in Portugal, then you have to pay IMI, which is basically the equivalent of rates or council tax in the UK, or some kind of municipal property tax in the US. I'm not really familiar with the name of it over there. But basically, it's a levy calculated as a percentage of the value of your property that you have to pay every single year as the property owner. Now, fortunately in Portugal, it's not that high. It tends to come in at a level of about 0.3 to 0.6% of the tax assessed value of the property. And the tax assessed value of the property is always much, much lower than the actual purchase price of the property in almost all cases. For example, in my own case, the tax assessed value of the property is approximately a third of the actual purchase price that I paid. So if you buy a property in Portugal and it's less than a tax assessed value of €125,000, and as long as your household income is under €153,000 a year, which I think is doable for most people, you will be exempted from IMI for the first 3 years. And this is definitely true in my case. However, for the purpose of my budget, I am including an IMI charge because this is just a temporary situation. It only lasts for 3 years. I've already had 1 year of no payment. I have another 2 to go, but it's going to cost me about €30 a month at the end of the day, starting in 2026. Another thing that needs to be considered when you're talking about the budget for having your own home is home maintenance expenses. Now, if you do this based upon what you spend in a given month, then the figure is very likely to be zero. And for me, that's a very serious problem because home maintenance can be quite expensive indeed. So I have budgeted around €200 per month for this, which I put into a separate fund every month in order to deal with expenses that might be met. Now, in the whole of 2023, the expenses for the entire year came to around €200. I had a small problem with the chimney, which needed to be repaired, and one of my electronic gates for vehicle access didn't work properly, and some guys had to come and install some new sensors and get it working. So about €200 is what I spent. I think it was 220, and that was for the whole of 2023. However, as properties age, as decor ages, this is not going to be a sustainable situation. You will come to a point where you have to redo your kitchen, or you have to redo your bathroom, or something breaks like your washing machine or something like that. And in that kind of situation, definitely you need to have some kind of budget put aside to be able to deal with it and to be able to pay for it. Even if you are very, very good at DIY and you don't need help, you're still going to have to pay for the materials. So in this €200 a month, I've included basically all aspects of home repair, including future decoration projects, like everything from painting the walls to getting plumbing done and maybe renewing the kitchen, once a decade or something like that. I think that this is very, very necessary to be part of a budget, and if you don't do it, then I think it's something that you will live to regret, because these kind of expenses can be very large, and if they're not budgeted for properly, then they'll come up and bite you. So my total for the home or accommodation category is €230 per month. €30 which I don't currently pay for IMI tax, and €200 budgeted for home maintenance and repairs. The next big expense that I want to address is groceries. Now, in our household, it comes down to two main things. The first thing is the normal shop in the supermarket. It could be Lidl or Continent, but it tends to be Pingo Doce in our case, sometimes Intermarché. And we go there twice a week. I take advantage of whatever promotions that they have, and basically €300 a month. However, that does exclude any kind of discounts that they offer. For example, it's quite typical for us to get €40 a month off in Pingo Doce. I exclude this from this calculation because I'm not sure if that promotion is going to exist forever, so let's not put it in there. We'd like to have certain things rather than things that might suddenly disappear. In addition to that, my wife is Chinese, and almost all of the cooking that she does is Asian, predominantly Chinese, and it's necessary for her to spend about €50 a month on ingredients and sauces and other things from the Chinese supermarket, special kinds of noodles and tofu and things like that, which cannot be obtained in the local supermarket. So it's about €50 a month, either from the supermarket in Porto, here in Portugal, or sometimes in Germany. There's a very good one as well, and I may have a separate video about that in the future. So grocery shopping, €350 per month. And bear in mind that in our family, we eat at home almost exclusively 3 meals a day. Okay, so that 350 basically covers all of the food that we consume, aside from the few occasions per month that we maybe go to visit friends and have dinner in their house or something. Another category is eating out. Now, this tends to be a massive feature of the budget for many people who make these cost of living videos. For me, though, it is not at all. I would say that my wife and I spend somewhere in the region of €30 a month on eating out, and that's mainly coffee. Coffee, or when I go to like the quiz or the games event or something which we have in our local area, drinks. I tend not to eat out, and I have very good reasons for that, having lived in Asia for such a long time. And the dominant one is I simply don't trust it. I don't trust the ingredients. I don't trust the quality of the preparation. I've just seen too many examples of food adulteration by restaurants in Asia on the news when I lived in China and Thailand, and it put me off eating in restaurants basically forever. I don't feel comfortable accepting food prepared by people who I don't know, not just from a food hygiene perspective, but from a nutritional perspective as well. And when you go outside, you don't know what restaurants put into the meal that you have eaten. You don't know the condition of the ingredients, the age of the ingredients. You don't know if there have been any kind of additives such as MSG put in there. And it's almost par for the course for a lot of salt and sugar, possibly other flavor enhancers to be used during cooking preparation in restaurants. Fundamentally, I just think it's a bad idea. But if people want to do it, I understand that they like the taste, and definitely it tastes good. But it's not something that I do, it's not something that I want to do, and consequently it's not a feature of this budget really. Now, moving on to talk about transportation. This is another interesting area, and one which I think some content creators probably could have handled a bit better. Now, in Portugal, I think it comes down to the question of whether you have your own transportation or whether you rely on public transportation. If you're relying on public transportation and that's what you want to do, you live in a big city like Lisbon or Porto, then I think it's very easy to compute your expenses. And for example, a video like the Expats Everywhere video would give you a very, very good idea of likely transportation costs. However, for people who are living in a rural context in Portugal, it's much, much more likely that you're going to have your own car. Either you're going to buy your own car or you're going to lease a car. I mean, those are basically the alternatives that you have. I chose to buy my own vehicle. And for that reason, I have various expenses associated with owning and maintaining and running that vehicle. Let's start with IUC, which is the tax on circulation of vehicles in Portugal. I have to pay about €240 per year in IUC, so that works out as €20 per month. For fuel, I do not drive a lot, and lately I've been paying nothing for fuel because I've been getting all those vouchers from Pingo Doce for BP fuel for free, which you can check out in my supermarkets video. However, before that, I was spending €50 a month on fuel, and if that promotion ever goes away, I will have to revert to spending €50 a month on fuel. That would be from Intermarché, and that would be Gasolina Simples 95. There's really no reason why anyone needs to be using premium gasoline. Intermarché is the cheapest source in most cases. For car insurance, of course, I have insurance. There are different insurance options in Portugal, as with everywhere else. You can either have fully comprehensive insurance, or you can have third-party insurance plus, for example, third-party insurance plus fire and theft and plus glass and that kind of thing. I have a policy which covers my car for third-party fire, theft, vandalism, glass damage, but not for damage to my own vehicle. It's not fully comprehensive insurance, and I pay €25 a month through Fidelity for that. Car maintenance is another factor. This is how much you spend to keep your car on the road. Now, I have budgeted, because I think it's something that needs to have a budget, this, rather than something that just relies on actual expenses. My actual expense for the past year for maintaining the car came to €175. However, I have budgeted 50 per month for this. And I think that that's way more realistic as the car ages. I have a new car at the moment, it's only 2 years old, but as it gets older, it's going to require things like new tires, new windscreen wipers. It's not just going to be a case of changing the oil and the filters when it comes to have a service. There are going to be other things like spark plugs and other stuff that needs to be changed. So I think it's worthwhile having a decent budget for that, because as your vehicle ages, if you choose to own your own car, then you're definitely going to encounter more and more expenses. So I would say an average of €50 per month, 600 per year, is ballpark accurate for car maintenance. The alternative to purchasing a vehicle is, of course, to lease one. Now, if you lease one, then a lot of these expenses that I previously mentioned go away, except for the gasoline. You wouldn't have to pay the tax, you wouldn't have to pay the insurance, you wouldn't have to pay the maintenance cost. That would be covered in the lease. However, I don't think that this is a very economical choice, but some people do want to do it because it gives them the flexibility to have a fairly new car and then just to switch it for another fairly new car. Obviously, the time that you take the lease for will influence how much you pay per month, and also the type of vehicle that you decide to get. If you're looking at a relatively long lease, which would be a 7-year lease or 84 months, and also a very small vehicle, something like a Seat Ibiza or a small Fiat or something, then you can achieve this for under €300 per month all in. All you would have to do beyond that is to pay for the cost of fuel. If you're looking at other kinds of vehicles, maybe better vehicles, I saw a Volkswagen Polo for €371 per month. There was also a Ford Focus available for €440 per month, a Volkswagen Golf for €491 per month, and an Audi A2 for €499 per month. Now, even the last group of cars that I mentioned, they're kind of getting into the middle of the range. But they're not luxury cars by any means, and already you're spending like $6,000 a year just to have the car. If you multiply 6 by 7, then you're coming to €42,000 in expenses, which is basically the cost of buying the car. If you take a Volkswagen Golf for a 7-year lease, then you're going to be paying €42,000 over those 7 years, and at the end of the lease period you will have zero. because you return the car. Then you can go and lease another car, obviously, but you've taken an enormous loss there. Because in Portugal, second-hand cars do retain their value rather well. So an asset would be worth something if you were selling it after 7 years or 10 years or even 15 years in Portugal. It's quite viable to sell cars here, depending on the condition, obviously, for prices that would not be obtainable in other markets, like, for example, in the US or UK. So obviously, I didn't decide to lease a car. I looked at it and I decided it wouldn't be a very good idea. And I bought a new car. I bought a new Mazda 3. I will keep that car for around 10 years, and in order to buy that car new, I need about 42,000 euros for the purchase price. And therefore, I need to consider, where is that money going to come from? And in my opinion, it's necessary to have some kind of set aside in the monthly budget in order to pay for the future purchase of a car. Now, obviously, to protect against inflation, you can put that money into whatever you want, like maybe a high interest savings account, or it could be put into something like gold if you believe that that retains its value against inflation. It's really up to you. But in my case, I have budgeted 350 euros per month to basically pay for a new car of the same type. It might not be exactly the same model, but the same level anyway, after 10 years. And that excludes any potential resale value because, again, I am a very cautious person. I don't like to assume things. Like, for example, I don't want to assume that the Pingo Doce fuel promotion will just continue forever with BP. I also don't want to assume that gasoline-powered vehicles are going to retain their value as they have in the past 10 years in the future. Now we're seeing a wave of adoption of electric vehicles. Maybe that's sustainable, maybe it's not. I really don't know. But it's potentially possible that gasoline-powered vehicles may not retain their value in the future in Portugal as they have previously. And therefore, I don't want to count on that as part of a 10-year future-looking budget. I think that's a little bit irresponsible. So instead of that, I've decided to budget this 350 per month to basically pay for the cost of a new car. Now, this is something, both the car lease expense and the car purchase cost expense, it's not something that you will typically see in other cost of living videos in Portugal. To be honest, I really don't know why. For those people who are depending exclusively on public transport, yes, it's understandable. But for those people who own cars or lease cars and drive cars, I don't understand. I really don't. The next category are utilities. Now, in my mind, utilities embrace everything that I basically have to pay for around the house. So we've got water, obviously, electricity. I do not have gas, but gas would be included in this. I also include things like internet and phone service in this category because for me it's just really a fixed monthly cost. So let's run down what they are. For the internet, it's actually my highest expense. I get internet, which is satellite internet, through mail, together with a TV package, which I do not want, and a fixed line phone, which I also do not want. And the grand total for that is 38 euros per month. Used to be 36, but when you sign a contract with any of these companies, you will find that there's a clause in it that allows them to increase the prices every year in line with some kind of measure of inflation at the very least. So it's now closer to 38 euros per month for the internet service. And I think that that's a fairly average internet service. It's certainly nothing special. But it's something that most people could live with. There are other packages available, both cheaper and more expensive, but I think it's fairly average. For water expenses, I will actually show my water bill on screen, but the average cost is about 30 euros a month. It varies depending on whether it's summer or winter. I tend to use a lot of water compared to many other people who make these kind of videos. I assume that there are two reasons for this. Although my wife and I are just a couple, as are most of the other content creators who do these kind of videos, we live in a house, we have a big garden, I need to water it. So there are flowers and some trees and also some vegetables which we're trying to grow which require water. And my wife does all the cooking at home, and that will use more water than people who are perhaps going out more often to dine. For phones, I have a separate video on the best phone packages in Portugal. My wife and I both have Leica Mobile, which gives us 5 gigabytes of data and 500 minutes of calls and texts, which we never use. The price is $6.66 each per month, so that comes to $13.32, and we've had that for a year and a half now, and we are very, very happy with it. The electric bill, also variable, which is one reason why I don't think it's a good idea to just focus on 1 month's expenses for doing these kind of videos. The average cost of my electricity is about €30 a month. If I did it based on my last month's bill, which was for July, August, it would be €16.45. I think that would give people a bit of a false picture, because electricity expenses are very variable in Portugal depending on the weather. In the summertime where I live, it's not necessary to use air conditioning. We don't have that expense. So electricity expenses tend to be quite low during the summer, whereas in the winter it is very much necessary to use heating. Possibly if someone lives in Madeira or the Algarve, they might get away with less heating. Whether or not they get away with none, I'm not sure. But if you're in Central Portugal or Northern Portugal, if you're living somewhere like Porto or Coimbra or Oliveira de Hospital or somewhere like that, or Viseu, you're definitely going to require heating in the winter time. Basically from November until February, I would say. Of course, it might not be on every day, and it probably wouldn't be on all day, but you're going to require heating. And there can be a dramatic difference in electricity costs based on the season, as it simply costs more to heat hot water that's colder, and people are using their radiators and other methods to heat their house. For example, one of my neighbours has electric underfloor heating, which he uses quite a lot. I am by no means a heavy user of electricity, but my electricity bill in the winter months tends to get up to about €60. Whereas in the summer, it's much more like 16, 17, 20, something like that. So I've drawn an average around €30. Also factored into this cost would be a couple of things. First of all, my electricity bill is reduced dramatically from around March to November, dramatically reduced by the fact that I have solar panels. I am at home most of the day with my wife, and we consume most of our energy during the day when the solar panels are operational. So we're basically using computers and ovens and washing machines and all that kind of thing. We have a fully electric home, and it costs us almost nothing because of the solar panels. Now, in addition to that saving, we sell electricity back to the grid, and at the present time I can't give you a full number for earnings for 2024 because the system has only been in for 8 months. But based on the earnings thus far over the 8 months that I've had the system in place, about €20 per month can be deducted from electricity costs based upon sales from the solar system. So when I say 30, I actually mean 50. Unless you have a solar system, it would probably be closer to 50 per month. If you're at home a lot and you're using heat in the winter, and a lot of people in Portugal, especially Central Portugal, they're older people, they're retirees, they are at home a lot, and they do have big houses and they do heat them. I have several neighbours who have electricity bills that are 400, 500 a month in the winter. So to tell people that your electricity bill is going to be, €25 a month or something based upon the tiny apartment, even if it is in Porto or something, I think could be a little bit misleading. We need to consider that not everybody has the same kind of living environment. And if you're in a larger property, and if you spend a lot of time in it, and if you're in central or northern Portugal, you're definitely going to have higher heating costs in the winter months. Okay, another area, electronics. Now I have a separate budget for this of 100 a month, okay? And this includes two things. It includes mobile phones and it includes computers. 100 a month for me and my wife. And basically the idea behind this is that every 4 years we want to change our phone and our computer. We both do. And it costs around 1,000, maybe a little bit more than 1,000 for a computer now, and almost the same for an iPhone. So if you have 100 a month over 4 years, that will give you €4,800. That should be more than sufficient to cover those costs. Now, I think that this is another expense that people need to take more into consideration when they make these kind of videos, because if you don't, then how are you actually going to afford it if you haven't budgeted for it? It's not the kind of thing that just happens in 1 month a year, it happens every few years. Now, if you want to change your electronics more or less frequently, you can always adjust this number accordingly. But I think for me, 4 years is pretty much a sweet spot. The next category, clothing and miscellaneous. This includes things you wear, also things like your bed sheets, towels, stuff for the house, like maybe you want to get a new picture, or you want to get a new house plant, or you need to replace some cutlery or plates or bowls or any of this kind of stuff. That needs to be calculated for. If you don't have a budget for it, then you end up spending more than what you expect. Now, I have calculated €250 per month for this. It's not because I buy a lot of clothes, it's just because there are a lot of little things that you end up buying. And this would include also things like haircuts, stuff like that. Maybe you want to take a day trip, or maybe you want to go away for a couple of days and stay in a hotel. When it's averaged out over the year, €250 a month, the total for that would be €3,000 per year. I think that it's comfortable, and you really need to have this kind of miscellaneous budget just to cover all those little expenses that don't fit neatly into any of the other categories. I have looked at our spending on these kind of things, and I think that €250 a month for us is actually accurate in this case. Next up, we have insurance. Now, this would be things like health insurance or home insurance, life insurance, all of these kind of insurances. Now, my expense for this is zero. I pay nothing. In terms of health insurance, I am a European. I grew up in the UK. I do not have an American attitude towards private health insurance, let's say. I see a lot of content creators, predominantly from the US, talking about health insurance issues, and it just seems to be accepted as a norm that private health insurance is necessary. And if you feel that way, then fine. However, I would say for myself, and also for the majority of people I know here, including many older people, they depend upon the SNS, which is the National Health Service of Portugal. If you are a resident here, a legal resident, and especially if you've transitioned from an EU country, it's very, very easy to get a health insurance number here. And as a result, healthcare is free, and it's not bad at all. I mean, I know that there are some images of like Medicare or something like that, a guy with a saw amputating a guy's leg or something. It's just really not like that. The standard of medical care in Portugal in the public healthcare system is fine. And if you require emergency care, you're not going to go to a private clinic anyway. You have to go to A&E, accident and emergency, and that's going to be the public healthcare system. For myself, I am fairly young. I'm in my 40s. I walk for 2 or 3 hours a day. I do half an hour of rowing. I have my home gym and I use that, my Molly gym, etc. I don't eat much meat. I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. I don't have a sedentary lifestyle. For me, it just feels like throwing money in the toilet, basically, to give money to a private health insurance company. Now, if you feel differently and you think that it's necessary for you, or you want some kind of deluxe treatment when you go to hospital, if you go to hospital, which I hope you don't, then by all means go for it. And there are decent plans available for basically €100 a month. I've seen them. I've had people call me up and try to persuade me to get it. But I haven't. And I think for someone in my position, it is the right choice. I've never been admitted to hospital in my life. I have no history of any kind of medical conditions. I'm not on any prescription drugs or anything like that. And I really just don't see the need for it. Life insurance I also regard as unnecessary. I'm retired. I'm not working. My wife is the same. And our financial arrangements are set. If I wasn't here or she wasn't here, then there wouldn't be any financial problem for the other party. So again, it's basically just a waste of money in my opinion. Home insurance would be the one that I have considered. I haven't actually got it yet. It's about €30 a month ballpark if you wanted to get it. But I haven't because I live in an area with very, very, very low crime. And I don't feel that there are any natural disasters that are likely to happen in my area aside from forest fires, and I take care to make sure that my property is well maintained so that it wouldn't spread easily here. So I don't have home insurance. It's the only one of the three that I would consider getting. And as I said, it runs about €30 a month, but at the present time it is a cost of zero for me. Lastly on this list we have subscriptions, and this means to services like Netflix and Amazon Prime. In fact, those are the only two that I'm going to discuss. Now, Netflix has a nominal cost of €11.99 per month, and Amazon Prime is $4.99 per month as well. But if you get the annual subscription, it is $49.99. Now, in both of these cases, I receive these services for free through refunds from some kind of debit cards that I have. But let's just assume that I do not get them for free. It would add an extra $4.17 per month for Amazon Prime. If you take $49.99 and divide it by 12, it's $4.17, and Netflix, as I previously said, was €12. So it's basically adding an additional €16.16 to monthly expenses. Now, at present, I do not have that expense, but in the future, these promotions might not be there, so I have to compute it as a possibility. One thing that I haven't included in this budget is travel. You know, if someone wants to go on a world cruise or something like that, or they want to spend like 2 months in Italy eating and drinking and all of those kind of things, that would be fantastic, obviously, but I haven't included it in the budget. In the miscellaneous section, which was $250 a month, I included the possibility of taking little trips and things like that. I think that's reasonable. I'm not going to start calculating big holidays because everybody has different kinds of expectations when it comes to travel. Some people like to travel a lot, and others are just fairly happy where they are. And I find the attitude with many people who have retired to Portugal, and it's kind of my attitude as well, is that I kind of feel like I am on holiday. You know, I've retired overseas. You know, why would I want to go on holiday for my holiday? Something like that. So, I mean, I'm not really very big on traveling. I traveled a lot when I was younger. I lived in other countries for the majority of my adult life, predominantly in Asia. And travel is not really something that I'm hungry to do. Since I have a dog, it's difficult as well for me to travel easily. So it's not something that appears on this budget. I have a dog, and expenses associated with visiting the vet for the dog are also included in the miscellaneous category. My dog is only 1.5 years old. She only needs injections. It's less than €100 a year. Another thing I should probably point out, it's a minor thing though, that doesn't appear in many of the videos on living costs, would be expenses associated with bank account maintenance. In Portugal, bank accounts usually charge you maintenance fees, and some of them can be quite expensive. You know, I know people who are paying 10 to 15 euros a month for bank account maintenance, especially if you have several bank accounts, which many people tend to do. It's something you might want to pay attention to. You know, you might find that you're spending 20, 25 euros just on bank account maintenance fees or card fees or something. And it's something that I plan to do an upcoming video on about how to reduce those fees. But if you are in the position where you're paying these fees, obviously you have to take it into consideration for your budget. Fortunately, I'm not banking with a bank that has a maintenance fee. There are very, very few banks in Portugal that do not have maintenance fees, but I'm happy to say I'm with one of them. So, what is the grand total for all of these expenses? How much do I pay, and should I be prepared to pay per month for living in a house with a car in rural Portugal? Well, my grand total is actually lower than almost every other video that I've seen on this topic, despite the fact that I have included many things which were not included in those videos. For example, the cost of buying a new car every 10 years. And the cost is €1,585 per month. All of the things that have been discussed in this video are very much included in that, and I think it can be done significantly cheaper. You know, for example, if someone is prepared to buy a cheaper car than I did, or if they're prepared to run that car for 15 or 20 years instead of 10 years, I think it could make a dramatic difference in the overall cost. It could easily take a couple of €100 a month off your costs. If someone is prepared to maybe keep their electronics for an extra 2 years, then that could also save a significant amount off the costs that you have. What I've tried to do here is produce a realistic budget for someone who owns their own property, maintains their own property, and owns their own car and has to maintain it as well. I think that there are not so many videos which deal with people in that situation, and also for people who are living in other parts of Portugal outside the major urban areas or the tourist hotspots. I just wanted to include this summary here, which shows all of the expenses that I've discussed broken down into different categories, and it gives the grand total there, which I've rounded up to €1585 per month. If you want to think about it annually, it's around about €19,000 per year. Not an enormous amount of money. And for this, at least in Central Portugal, you can have a very, very comfortable life in which you own your own large 4-bedroom modern home and drive a new car, and life is pretty comfortable and good. Here are some other totals which I gathered following a review of this topic of the cost of living in Portugal in 2024 by various other YouTube channels. The first one, It'll Be Fun, based in Madeira, a couple from the US, €2,300 per month, their estimate. Expats Everywhere, a couple with a young child in Porto, in the mainland. They had a cost estimate of over €3,000 per month, but they said that they should probably take off 25% to reflect their daughter's expenses in order to reach a total which is reflective of the true cost of a couple. So the final number is 2,305 for them. And finally, Track Us Down, also in Madeira, 1,846 per month. So you can set my total of 1,585 against those other totals. I am in Central Portugal, which is definitely far cheaper than Porto or Madeira or Algarve. So that's one of the factors involved. And I also think that I'm relatively good when it comes to things like controlling my finances and setting budgets. I think that's another factor that's involved. So I hope everyone found this rather long video helpful. I hope it clears up some areas of doubt about the true cost of living in Portugal. It has increased from when I arrived here in 2021 until now. There has been inflation, particularly in the realm of fuel and groceries. Somewhere in the order to 20 to 30% would be my ballpark estimate of that, but it is still cheap compared to many Western European countries or indeed North America. And I don't think that anyone should be deterred from moving to Portugal now in 2024 based upon a perceived high cost of living. I still think that Portugal has a more favourable situation when it comes to living cheaply compared to most places in Western Europe, perhaps not Spain though, and certainly compared to North America. Anyway, I hope that everyone found this content helpful, and I will see you soon, I hope, in the next video.